Long before there were 12, there was one. Picture a young god at the foot of a mountain. He has just won a war. 10 years against his own father, a titan named Cronus, who, fearing prophecy, swallowed each of his children at birth. He swallowed 5. Zeus survived only because his mother Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and fed it to the king of the Titans instead. The stone is still mentioned in the old texts. Hesiod tells us it was set up at Delphi, an object of pilgrimage, the rock that fooled a god. The boy grew. He returned. He forced Cronus to vomit up his siblings, 3 sisters and 2 brothers, all fully grown, all hungry for revenge. Together, they fought the Titans for 10 years on the plains of Thessaly. And when it was done, Zeus and his 2 brothers, Poseidon and Hades, stood at the threshold of a new world and did something simple. They drew lots. Zeus drew the sky. Poseidon drew the sea. Hades drew the dark places below the earth. From this single afternoon, on a mountain that did not yet have a name, the entire pantheon of Greek mythology was about to take shape. 12 gods would claim the peak. Some you know. Others have faded almost entirely from memory, and one of them, the one who would arrive last, would take a seat that had belonged to someone else. What did they want from us? That is the question we will be returning to. This is every Greek god explained. The Greek gods, as we have them, come down to us through a handful of texts. The oldest and the most systematic is the Theogony of Hesiod, written around 700 BCE, a poet from Boeotia who claimed the muses themselves taught him while he was tending sheep. The Theogony is the closest thing we have to a Greek Genesis. From it we learn that before the gods there was chaos. From chaos came Gaia, the earth, and from Gaia came Uranus, the starry sky. Their union produced the Titans. The Titans, in turn, produced the gods who would overthrow them. So when we speak of the Greek gods, we are speaking properly of the 3rd generation. 12 who would, for the next 1,000 years, dominate the religious imagination of the ancient Mediterranean. Their home was Mount Olympus. Not the actual mountain in Thessaly, that one is just a mountain, but Olympus, the idea. A peak above the clouds, where the air did not move, and the gods drank nectar and ate ambrosia and watched the lives of mortals the way wealthy patrons watch a play. 12 thrones, 12 seats. Though, as we will see, it was not always the same 12. The order in which we will meet them today is roughly the order in which an ancient Greek would have ranked them, by power, by familiarity, by the weight of the stories that gathered around their names. We begin where every Greek invocation began. We begin with Zeus. He is younger than you imagine. By the time the war with the Titans was over, Zeus was perhaps in his early 20s, old enough to lead an army, young enough that the broken world before him was the only one he would ever know how to rule. He took the sky as his domain, and he never let go of it. Every Greek oath was sworn in his name. Every traveler seeking shelter was, by ancient custom, under his protection. The thunderbolt was his, a weapon forged for him by the Cyclopes, 3 one-eyed giants whom Cronus had imprisoned in Tartarus and whom Zeus, on his first day of kingship, set free. But Zeus was a king of appetites. His marriages to Hera were constantly disrupted by his pursuits of others. From his union with the Theban princess, Semele, came Dionysus, a god born twice. From his union with a Phoenician princess called Europa, kidnapped while gathering flowers on a beach, Zeus took the form of a white bull to do it, came Minos, the future king of Crete. The list goes on. Half the heroes of Greek myth carry his blood. Hercules, Perseus, Helen of Troy. What Zeus wanted from us was the thing kings have always wanted: oaths, sacred promises, things spoken aloud in his name and not broken. When you broke them, the lightning came. Hera was the wife. That is how she is usually introduced, and that is how the introduction usually fails her. She was also Zeus's sister, the Olympian arrangements being what they were, and she was, before she married, a major goddess in her own right. In Argos and Samos, her temples are older than his. In the Iliad, when Hera is angry, the war shifts. Her power was not borrowed from her husband. It only looked that way once they had moved into the same house. The marriage was difficult. Zeus had affairs, and Hera could not punish him directly. He was, after all, the king. And so she punished the women instead. Io, a mortal princess, was turned into a cow and pursued across the world by a stinging gadfly. Semele, asking to see Zeus in his true form, was incinerated by lightning before she could give birth. And Zeus, in a moment that is rarely emphasized, scooped the unborn Dionysus from her body and sewed him into his own thigh until he was ready to be born again. The trick had Hera's fingerprints all over it. But Hera's most surprising act was reserved for her own son. When Hephaestus was born, and we will come to him, he was, in some versions of the story, simply too ugly for her. So she threw him from Olympus, her own child, from her own arms, down to the sea. The goddess of marriage was capable of things that the institution she protected did not survive intact. What did Hera want? Recognition, the thing Zeus most consistently denied her. When the three brothers drew their lots, Poseidon drew the sea. He was, by all accounts, the second most powerful of the gods. His weapon was the trident, forged by the same Cyclopes who made Zeus's lightning. His chariot was drawn by white horses with brass hooves. When he was angry, the earth shook. Greeks did not yet distinguish between the sea and the geological violence that surrounded their peninsula. And so, the same god who brought the storm also brought the earthquake. But Poseidon is also, strangely, the god of horses. The Greeks could not quite say why. One myth says that he created the first horse in a competition with Demeter for her favor. Another says he produced Pegasus from the blood of Medusa. Medusa, who had been a priestess of Athena until Poseidon raped her in Athena's temple, for which Athena, with the awful logic of the ancient world, punished the victim rather than the perpetrator. And then there was Athens. Athens was a young city, looking for a patron. Two gods presented themselves, Poseidon and Athena. Poseidon struck the Acropolis with his trident, and a spring of salt water gushed out. A useful gift, in theory. Athena offered an olive tree. The Athenians chose the tree. The olive, for oil, for food, for wood, was the more durable promise. Poseidon walked out of the contest, having been beaten by a niece, who was, by some accounts, younger than his own marriage. He never quite forgave Athens. Most Greek heroes who anger the sea on their voyages home, Odysseus most famously, do so by failing to honor the god whose city they did not choose. What did Poseidon want? To be remembered when his brother's lightning got the better headlines. Demeter is the goddess of the grain, of the harvest, of the cultivated field. Her name in some readings means simply Earth Mother, and for most of her existence, she was a steady, almost agricultural presence, until the day Hades, the lord of the underworld, climbed up through a crack in the ground and stole her daughter. The girl's name was Persephone. She had been picking flowers in a meadow with her companions when the earth opened. Hades, Zeus's brother, Demeter's brother, had asked Zeus for the girl as a wife. Zeus had, with diplomatic cowardice, neither agreed nor refused. He simply did not warn Demeter. Persephone vanished. Demeter searched for 9 days and 9 nights, carrying torches, refusing food. When she finally learned the truth, from Hecate, an older goddess we will not have time for today, but who deserves her own film, she withdrew her grace from the world. The wheat did not grow. The cattle did not calve. Mortals began to die of hunger by the thousands. This, the Homeric hymn to Demeter tells us, was the world's first winter. Zeus, panicking, eventually negotiated. Persephone would return to her mother for part of the year. She would return to Hades for the rest. But she had eaten 6 pomegranate seeds in the underworld, and the food of the dead binds those who taste it. So for 6 months a year, the grain grows. For 6 months, Demeter mourns. What did Demeter want from us? Mostly an acknowledgement of what mothers carry. Her cult at Eleusis, the Eleusinian Mysteries, was the longest-running religious initiation in the ancient world. For nearly 2,000 years, people came to the small town of Eleusis to learn whatever it was that Demeter taught about grief. We still do not know what it was. The initiates kept the secret. Most gods are born from the union of two parents. Athena is not. The story is this. Zeus, while king of Olympus, was warned by a prophecy that any child born of his union with the Titaness Metis, whose name means wisdom, would overthrow him. Zeus's response, in the manner of his father before him, was to swallow the problem. He swallowed Metis whole, while she was pregnant. He believed he had absorbed the prophecy, but the child continued to grow inside him. And one day, Zeus developed what was either the worst headache in cosmic history or the worst case of indigestion. He summoned Hephaestus, the smith god, and asked to be split open. Hephaestus drove an axe into his father's skull, and out of the wound stepped Athena, fully grown, fully armored, helmet on her head, spear in her hand, war cry already on her lips. She was Zeus's favorite child from the moment she was born, perhaps because she was the only child he had truly made by himself. Her epithet was Glaucopis, grey-eyed or owl-eyed, and the owl became her sacred animal. Her shield, the Aegis, carried the severed head of Medusa, given to her by Perseus. She was not a goddess of brute war. That was Ares, whom we will meet shortly. She was a goddess of strategy, of the moment in battle when the cleverer side wins. She also wove. The contest with Arachne, a mortal woman who claimed to weave better than Athena, ended badly for the mortal. Athena turned her into a spider. There is a pattern here. The Greek gods did not like to be challenged by humans. What did Athena want from us? Intelligence applied to action. She had little patience for either pure thought or pure violence. The thing she protected, and the thing her city Athens carried into the next 1,000 years of European thought, was the difficult middle. Apollo is the easiest god to misunderstand because he is the god of so many things. He was a god of music. The lyre was his, and the contest with the satyr Marsyas, who challenged him on the flute, ended with Marsyas flayed alive for his presumption. He was a god of poetry, of healing, of prophecy. He was the god of order, of the precise, the measured, the bright. But here is the surprise. Apollo was not originally the god of the sun. That was Helios, an older god, a Titan-aligned figure who drove the chariot of the sun across the sky each day. Apollo absorbed the solar role only later during the classical period, when his cult was strong enough to swallow Helios's. The Romans would call him Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, and forget that he had ever been anything else. His most important shrine was at Delphi. The story of how he won it is brutal. A serpent, a python, guarded the oracle there, an older, chthonic creature aligned with the earth goddess. Apollo killed it. The priestess who spoke the oracles, the Pythia, was named after the serpent he had slain. Apollo had taken the sanctuary and rewritten the source. He also pursued Daphne, a nymph who did not want him. She prayed to her father, a river god, to be saved. Her father turned her into a laurel tree, just as Apollo was about to seize her. Apollo, defeated but unwilling to leave empty-handed, took the laurel as his sacred plant. Victorious poets and athletes wore laurel crowns thereafter. The laurel, in other words, is what you wear when the god could not have what he wanted. What did Apollo want? Beauty. Order. The thing the Greeks called cosmos. The world arranged so that it made sense. Apollo and Artemis were twins, born to Zeus and a Titaness named Leto. Their birth was nearly impossible. Hera, learning of Leto's pregnancy, had forbidden any land to receive her, and Leto wandered for months, refused by every island and shore, until finally a small floating rock named Delos took her in. Apollo was born there. Artemis, in some versions, was born first and immediately helped her mother deliver her brother. She was a midwife, in other words, before she was a moment old. She demanded eternal virginity at the age of 3. Her father, Zeus, who could deny her nothing, granted it. She asked for a bow, a quiver, a short tunic, 60 nymphs as companions, and all the mountains of the world. He granted those too. From that day, she lived in the forests of Cithaeron and Erymanthus, hunting deer, refusing all marriages, demanding the same celibacy from the women who followed her. When mortals interrupted her, the punishments were absolute. A young hunter named Actaeon stumbled upon her bathing in a forest pool. Artemis turned him into a stag, and his own hunting dogs tore him to pieces. A mortal queen, Niobe, boasted that her 14 children made her more blessed than Leto with her 2. Artemis and Apollo killed every one of Niobe's children in an afternoon. The mother turned to stone from grief. Artemis is the god most often misunderstood by readers raised on later, gentler images of the moon. She is not gentle. She is the wildness that does not need your permission. She is the part of the world that does not exist to be civilized. What did Artemis want? To be left alone in the woods, and when she was not, to be feared. The Greeks, who lived in cities that fought constantly, did not particularly like the god of war. This is the surprise. Ares is one of the 12 Olympians, son of Zeus and Hera, by their normal, legitimate marriage. He is officially the god of war. And yet, read the Iliad carefully. The Greek soldiers do not pray to him. They pray to Athena. They pray for strategy. They pray to win. Ares was the god of war, as the Greeks actually experienced it. Chaotic, bloody, full of rage and unreason, the loss of friends and the betrayal of intentions. He was not the god of victory. He was the god of the part of war that nobody romanticizes. Homer calls him hateful to all the gods, and Zeus himself, in the Iliad, says, "Of all the gods who hold Olympus, you are the most hateful to me, for ever quarrel is dear to your heart, and wars and battles." His most famous story is not a war story. It is an affair. Aphrodite, married to Hephaestus the smith god, was sleeping with Ares. Hephaestus knew. He forged an invisible net of bronze chains, finer than spider's silk, and laid it over the bed. He waited. When Aphrodite and Ares came together, the net dropped. They could not move. Hephaestus then invited every god on Olympus to come and look. The Iliad says the goddesses, out of modesty, stayed home. The male gods came and laughed. And yet Homer tells us that more than one of them, looking at the trapped Aphrodite, privately wished he were in Ares's place. What did Ares want? Combat, pure, uncomplicated, with no purpose beyond itself. The Greeks understood this desire. They just did not honor it. There are 2 birth stories for Aphrodite, and the Greeks could not agree on which was true. Homer says she was the daughter of Zeus and a goddess named Dion, a clean, conventional birth into the family. This is the polite version. Hesiod's version is older and considerably more brutal. According to the Theogony, the original sky god Uranus was castrated by his son Cronus during the rebellion that ended the rule of the primordial gods. The severed parts of Uranus fell into the sea. They drifted on the foam. And from that foam, from the dissolved body of a castrated grandfather god, Aphrodite rose, fully formed, the goddess of beauty, born from a wound. The Greeks held both versions, the brutal one and the polite one. They did not choose. They preferred a goddess whose origins were, in some sense, irreducibly strange. She was married to Hephaestus, as we have already seen, in an arrangement made by Zeus to keep peace among the gods, the most beautiful goddess given to the ugliest god as compensation for his exile. She did not love him. She loved Ares. The affair was constant, but her most consequential romance was not with a god at all. It was with a Trojan prince named Paris. She bribed him during the famous judgment of Paris by promising him the most beautiful mortal woman in the world. Helen who was already married to a Greek king named Menelaus. Paris took her. Menelaus pursued. The Trojan War followed, a war that killed thousands, that destroyed a city, that the Iliad records over 24 books, all of it set in motion by Aphrodite, making a promise she had no business making. What did Aphrodite want? Desire. The unstoppable kind, the kind that ruins kingdoms and reorders the world. We have already met Hephaestus twice in passing, and he deserves his own segment. He was the son of Hera, in some versions, of Hera alone, with no father, conceived in spite to match Zeus's solo creation of Athena. He was born lame, ugly, and small, and Hera, looking at the child she had made, threw him from Olympus. He fell for an entire day. He landed in the sea. He was rescued by two sea nymphs, Thetis and Eurynome, who raised him for 9 years in an underwater cave. There he learned to work metal. By the time he returned to Olympus, he was the only god who could make anything, the only one whose power came not from being born to it, but from work. He forged Zeus's thunderbolt. He forged Athena's aegis. He forged Achilles' armor in a single night. The bronze net that trapped his wife and Ares, also his work. The first woman, Pandora, was sculpted from clay by his hands at Zeus's command. He was the only god who labored, the only god who sweated, the only one who walked with a limp. What did Hephaestus want? To be useful, to be valued for the work, not pitied for the body. The Greeks gave him cult worship in places where craftsmen lived, Lemnos especially, where his forge was said to be active beneath a volcano. He never forgave Hera, but he made for her a golden throne that bound her invisibly the moment she sat on it. The other gods begged him to release her. He refused for years. Eventually, Dionysus got him drunk and brought him back to Olympus. He freed his mother. He was given Aphrodite as a wife. It was, for him, the closest thing to a happy ending the Greek pantheon offered. Hermes was born in a cave on Mount Cyllene in Arcadia to a nymph named Maia. By the time he was a few hours old, he had crawled out of his cradle, walked outside, found a tortoise, killed it, scooped out the body, strung the shell with cow gut, and invented the lyre. By that afternoon, the same day of his birth, he had stolen 50 cattle from his older brother Apollo, walked them backwards into a cave so the tracks were misleading, and returned to his cradle to feign innocence. When Apollo confronted him, Hermes lied directly to a god of prophecy's face. Apollo dragged him to Zeus. Zeus, looking at this newborn who had committed cattle theft and perjury before nightfall, laughed. Hermes became the messenger of the gods. He wore winged sandals, the talaria. He carried the caduceus, a herald's staff entwined with 2 serpents. He was the patron of travelers, of merchants, of thieves, of liars, and of all who crossed boundaries. The most important boundary he crossed was the boundary of death. Hermes was the psychopomp, the guide of souls. When mortals died, he met them and led them to the entrance of the underworld. He was the only Olympian permitted to pass freely between the worlds of the living and the dead. He was, in some sense, the kindest of the gods, the one who held your hand for the last walk. What did Hermes want? Movement, trade, the crossings between things. He was the god of the in-between. We have come to the 12th and final Olympian, and here the story changes. Dionysus was the latest god to join the pantheon. He was, in some sense, an outsider, born to a mortal mother, Semele, the Theban princess whom Hera had tricked into asking Zeus to reveal himself in his true form. Semele burned to ash. Zeus saved the unborn child by sewing him into his own thigh. Dionysus was born a second time from the body of his father and grew up wandering through Asia Minor, through India, learning to make wine, gathering a following of women called the Maenads who tore men apart in religious ecstasy. When he finally came to Olympus, there was a problem. There were only 12 thrones, and so According to one version of the myth, Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, the eldest of the original 12, the sister of Zeus, who had asked, like Artemis, for eternal virginity, quietly gave up her seat. She did not need it. She would tend the fire of every Greek home instead. She would be present at every hearth, in every house, in every city. She would not need a throne on Olympus. And so the 12 became the 12 we now know, with Dionysus among them, with Hestia, the gentlest of the gods, stepping aside. The 12 were not always the 12. What did they want from us? That is the question we began with, and now we can answer it. They wanted oaths, Zeus did. They wanted recognition, Hera. They wanted to be remembered, Poseidon. They wanted us to grieve, Demeter. The right way, the long way, the way the initiates at Eleusis grieved. They wanted intelligence applied to action, Athena. Beauty, Apollo. To be left alone, Artemis. Combat for its own sake, Ares. Desire, Aphrodite. To be useful, Hephaestus. The crossings, Hermes and Dionysus. What did Dionysus want? He wanted us briefly to stop being ourselves. But the deeper answer is this. They wanted our stories. They are still here because we still tell them. Sunday is named for the sun, and the sun, in late Greek thought, was Apollo. Saturday is named for Saturn, who is Cronus, Zeus's defeated father. The gods walked off the high places of Olympus a long time ago. They did not leave us. Hestia is still at the hearth. She gave up her throne. She did not give up her work.